Welcome to the KiDDS Biz Podcast, your go-to source for unlocking the secrets to success in orthodontics and pediatric dentistry. Each episode, we bring you expert guests who share innovative strategies and insider tips to help your practice thrive. Whether you're looking to enhance patient care, boost your marketing, or stay ahead of industry trends, we've got you covered. Join us on this exciting journey to elevate your practice and make a lasting impact in the lives of your young patients. Let's dive in.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the KiDDS Biz Podcast. Dr. Ashley.
Hi.
How are you?
It's 2025. I feel good. I'm excited about our guest today. I feel like I'm going to be a sponge and soak up so much.
Yeah, let's get going. We got Dr. Joel Berg and Dr. Christina Carter. You guys want to say hey?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to 2025.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, before we get going, we're going to talk today about the kind of the co-located practice, the co-located workflow. Which I think is like the perfect topic for the KiDDS Biz Podcast. But before we dive in, would you guys mind just kind of introducing yourselves, telling everybody who you are? Dr. Carter, why don't you go first?
Sure. My name is Christina Carter. I attended New Jersey Dental School, now known as Rutgers, although it was UMDMJ when I went there. And then I did a pediatric dental residency at New York University, followed by an orthodontic residency at New York University. And then because it wasn't quite enough school for me, I decided I would do a little fellowship in cleft, craniofacial, and surgical orthodontics at the Institute of Reconstructive Plastic Surgery. So,
very impressive.
Too much school. I was in academics for a while at NYU. I still hold that position. And I worked for my father, who is an orthodontist, and then for another pediatric dentist. And then 9 years ago, this month, I decided to break off, become a big girl, and open up my own pediatric dental and orthodontic practice. And I practice in Madison, New Jersey.
Awesome. Well, that's a lot, but it's great.
Yeah, we have fun.
Yeah, great. All right, Dr. Berg.
Yes, pediatric dentist, Joel Berg. I've had an unusual career. I'm surrounded by orthodontists or people in the orthodontic business. I'm a bit intimidated. I have to get that out there, but I'll recover shortly, I promise. But I've had an unusual career. I thought I'd be a full-time academic, did that for a while in pediatric dentistry. And then I had this unusual opportunity to go lecture in Germany. I did a lot of research on glass ionomers, something that we all know about, glass ionomer cements. And then they asked me if I would work there. I quit my job a year later, moved to Germany. And 6 years there was magnificent, great experience. I was the only American and 1,000 Germans developing products. Then I didn't know what I would do next, moved back to the States, and I worked for the Sonicare toothbrush company. So I was the chief dental officer and hung out with orthodontists. Everything always brings me back to ortho. You know, I'm one of those pediatric dentists that I think orthodontists love because I don't do ortho. I'm afraid to put a space maintainer on. It might actually move a tooth or something, but I do. And then, so at Sonicare for 4 years while they were acquired by Philips and learned a lot there about the consumer business. Then I went back to academics, did a bunch of other stuff, and ended up being the dean of the dental school at the University of Washington, where I also got very close to ortho because they have such a strong, as you will know, ortho program there over many years. A lot of famous people and a lot of really good orthodontists coming out of the UW. And now I live in Arizona, and I have a startup company, and I help companies in the dental space. And that's how I met you, Davin, and others, and met Christina as an orthodontist, pediatric dentist on a podcast. So it all comes back to ortho.
I was really interested how you guys connected. So that was through filming a podcast?
Yeah,
Yes.
She was a guest. We have a committee that picks the guests, and I thought I knew everybody in pediatric dentistry, and apparently, she'd been given this lecture to us on ortho to the pediatric dentists for many years, and I'd never met her, and we met on a podcast. So, and now I'm discovering, just to conclude, not about me, but about the topic, Davin, that you introduced, I'm really I study the trends in the marketplace in the dental business because I work with, as I mentioned, a whole bunch of companies and helping them commercialize their products and their ideas. And I'm seeing some really big trends, big changes. Sometimes those trends aren't visible right away. But one of the ones that's not only visible but palpable, and we're just starting to get a handle on metrics of it, is, as you said, this co-location of pediatric dentistry and orthodontics. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah.
Well, so yeah, absolutely. And I would love to just kind of set the stage with, I mean, we've had a couple conversations about this, but when you say co-location, like what specifically are you talking about when it comes to co-location, and why is it important to kind of the practice of pediatric dentistry and orthodontics?
So I think I'm going to field this one. So in the past, you kind of had freestanding offices. You had a pediatric dentist, you have an orthodontist, you have a general dentist, perio, endo, oral surgery. And while you may have your pretty set referral patterns, you all were in your own home, and I know that from my father. And that was kind of how the world went. And I'd say in the last 20 years, group practices really started, 25 years, group practices started becoming a little more developed. But orthodontics was always kind of in their own little silo. And even when you talk to people, it's dentists and orthodontists. You always hear that. And orthodontists have their own software. We don't tend to use the main software that all the other, disciplines use. So it was very separate. But over the last 20 years, what I call co-location, now I am dual trained, but an orthodontist and a pediatric dentist are in the same house, where that's why we say cohabitation or co-location, but everybody's together. And so if you need to get a quick consult from an orthodontist, or, you don't have to pick up the phone or send a picture, you actually, just look down the hallway. Usually they're in separate little areas, and kind of say, hey, can you come over here for a second? And that's kind of more of the whole co-location. Now, there are pros and cons to this, but it's definitely beneficial for the patients.
I know that you said earlier that you yourself kind of work 50-50 because you love doing both. So are you working side by side, maybe other pediatric dentists or other orthodontists at the same time in your office? Or how does that kind of work? Because in our office, we're in California, and so rent is very, very expensive. We don't have the capacity in our first location as a startup to do pedo and ortho simultaneously. So it's like one day is a pedo day and one day is an ortho day. And, there's a lot of drawbacks from doing it that way.
Yeah, so I do have other pediatric dentists in my office. I am the only orthodontist right now, but I have a feeling that will be changing. But it's we all work together. We have, suburbs maybe a little less for rent than New York City or the big cities, but we're in a pretty high rent district, so I totally understand that.
What square footage do you guys have, and how many ops, if you can elaborate a little bit on kind of like how that layout works?
I have 2,400 square feet.
Oh, that's how much we're in. Okay. Now I'm like, tell me more.
And I have 10 chairs.
10 chairs. Okay. We're at 7. So you're probably a little bit more efficient in space then.
I'm very efficient in space. Everyone comes in and doesn't understand how I fit everything in this wide open space layout. I got very lucky, and I have a good space.
Do you have any private ops? I mean, I'm assuming with pedo, you've got to have some where it's private.
So we are divided in theory, 5 for pediatric dentistry and 5 for orthodontics, with 3-chair open bay for hygiene, 2 quiet rooms, and then 5 chairs open for ortho. However, all of the rooms are set up to do everything. So a hygienist can do a cleaning and an adjustment in the same chair.
Love that.
Our private rooms are set up for restorative and nitrous. Those are the only 2 rooms plumbed with nitrous. But sometimes if we have, siblings, we'll actually take 2 of the chairs in ortho and do that together. Or if we have a patient who either adult or special needs, who's an orthodontic patient, but who would thrive in a, a single room, in a quiet room, we have that flexibility and we plan that way.
Would you be willing to share your layout with our Facebook group?
Sure.
We
Sure.
would
That's
love
easy.
that. Yeah.
I'll send pictures. We have a very pretty office too.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Because I think that, in all the Facebook groups, everyone's always posting their layout and, trying to get advice on it. And it's like kind of the most stressful thing. We plan out our offices, and it sounds like you had a lot of experience prior, but I did not.
You hit it right on the head there. My experience of working for so many years, I knew exactly how I liked to practice, how much space I liked between the back of the chair and the cabinet. And I felt like every night was like the Queen's Gambit. I would lay in bed and think about moving walls and moving
See
spaces.
it on the ceiling.
Exactly. And there was one little problem, and I was like, I just don't think we have enough room there. And I thought about it all night, and I finally fell asleep. And in the morning, I woke up, I was taking a shower, and all of a sudden, the solution came up there. Because many of the office designers are experts, but they're not experts in how you practice. And that is very key. I had certain things that were huge for me, and I actually brought one of my hygienists with me to, we already had the plumbing done and all of that. But I just knew that one wall, it was too close between the back of the chair and the cabinet and for people to walk through. And they kept telling me, oh, you only need this amount. You only need this amount. You only need this amount of space. And I kept saying, it's too tight. It's too tight. So we actually put a template on the floor, and I brought a chair and I sit. I tend not to sit all the way in the back of the chair. I tend to sit more in the front of the chair, with good ergonomics. And I had my hygienist walk behind me, and everything bumped. Everything bumped. There wasn't enough room. It just was congested. And I said, if we bump this wall back 10 inches, we're going to be much better off. And I had great people there. I really did. But the answer was, but that's not what we do. You only need this amount of space. And I said, no, this is how I practice. And it was like, no, dentists sit in the back of their chair. And I kind of said to them, this is how I practice. And if we move that back 8 inches, then I know the next wall needs to get backed up, and then we can take out this wall. It's not just moving one thing. It's like dominoes.
Yeah.
And you really need to know how you practice and think everything through. I had a friend of mine who's an oral surgeon who built his office probably a year before me. And I was talking to him, and he said to me, watch every single decision. I know you're going to think it doesn't make a difference where you put my outlets for my plugs to plug things in, but pay attention, because when you work, it's not just cookie cutter. And I ended up moving a lot of different outlets based on his advice, and I think that's my biggest piece of advice. Greg said to me, you're going to come home, you're going to look at it after a long day of practice, your eyes are going to be tired, you're going to say, I don't care where the outlets are, or I don't care how the door opens. And you kind of say, I trust the people. And there's nothing wrong. I'm not criticizing those designers, but they don't know how you work. All of us have our ways, our quirks, I'm quirky with a capital Q, and I know I like to work certain ways. And you really need to sit and think and take the time. And even though things have to be decided by a certain hour, take the extra time to get a clear head. Look at those layouts, make the decision, think it through really, really thoroughly. And think actually when they do like the raw layout, I did templates. Big templates in cardboard of like where a chair would be, where the desk would be, where this would be. And is it enough room? Is it big enough for wheelchairs? Is it big enough for 2 parents in a room? We're the old way of practicing with parents that stay out in the waiting room or in their car is kind of changing, especially with these new way of parenting and helicopter parents and ski plow parents. And, who knows, there's another name that's coming out next week. I'm sure it's 2025. We'll have a new type of parent. and, we have to adapt to that. We really do. We really do.
I think if I could, go ahead, Ashley.
No, go ahead.
I was going to comment on your question and the really interesting response from Christina. because you were asking about this co-location and, what does it look like? And I'm learning a lot. When I first kind of realized, as I'm just kind of getting reacquainted with orthodontics from all these different perspectives, this co-location is really a lot of things, and it's a lot of trends in one. Christina was just talking about some of these practice nuances, and I have to sidebar and say, it's an unusual situation to have a dual-trained pediatric dentist first, then orthodontist, who remains practicing in both substantially. That's unusual. Right. Let's get that out there. And therefore, she's kind of like the definition of co-location in one person. So we need to tap into her experiences, like she was just describing about setting up the office, but all other aspects of the practice of co-location, because most people are not that in one person. They are two different people or multiple people, or they're a large DSO. The same principles that, Christina, you're talking about would apply to the practice elements. And that's just one part of the co-location and one part of the change in thinking. There's this whole the world I'm thinking about, and I'm not going to get into it right now unless you ask me. and that is the business of the co-location of pediatric dentistry and orthodontists from the outside. Yeah. What are these large groups thinking? What am I seeing? I interact with a lot of small, medium, large DSOs, whatever you call them, groups. And that's an inexorable force. It's where all the money is going. It will continue. And they're seeing this opportunity that Dr. Carter is describing, both from the internal perspective in the practice of how to be efficient and with workflows, which is the topic here, a topic, and also from a financial standpoint of an investment, from a mergers and acquisition standpoint.
So I would like, because, it sounds like you probably have a lot more information on data and statistics and things like that. I had a co-resident, and his dad had a pedo ortho, and he just basically told me from a practitioner standpoint, all the benefits of that co-location. And so I was like, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. And so I'm very happy that I went that direction, but I would love to kind of hear from you of like, what is that trend? What are you seeing? What is the business like? Tell me why I made the right decision.
You want to go first?
The first reason, hold on.
Yeah.
The first reason you made the right decision is because you're happy practicing where you practice.
Right.
That's true.
That's great.
Yeah, that's right. And I have to disclose, I've never owned a practice. I'm very supportive and admire practice owners. I remember I was doing a lot of podcasts when the pandemic hit, and all of you who own practices had to struggle to figure out, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? You're all taking a risk every day. And I like to look at the profession and the changes of the future is, where do I want to risk? And I see the co-location of pediatric dentistry. Christina's taught me to say Peds ortho, not pedo ortho, which I agree with. Peds ortho. Peds ortho is the place to go. And I think the order is correct too, because one of the other aspects that has driven this change, it used to be that, this with the separation and totally different locations, et cetera, that it was ortho. Everybody went into ortho, even if they were already trained as a pediatric dentist. Now the hot place is pediatric dentistry. So that the pediatric dentistry growth is really what's driving the co-location. It's the pediatric dentistry side.
Well, and I've got a question about, in terms of, do you have any statistics on what that looks like? Because, I've heard numbers as high as I've got one written down here that's like 62% of pediatric dentists are doing some sort of comprehensive orthodontics in their office, whether it's them or they have is that high or is that real?
It feels high to me. I promise you all, I'm going to get statistics. I knew you were going to ask about that. And because I'm just embarking upon this, I'm interacting with various large, small, medium companies, groups, everybody involved. Dr. Carter, who's doing this every day in practice. And I promise in the next month or two, I'm going to get some data regarding pediatric dentists. Just to say this, Christina, you can comment on this. The only thing that's really changed is aligners, okay, that might drive business. But I don't know what kind of traction's happening there. But go ahead, Christina.
So back to measuring what matters. The AAO is just started tracking in the last few years how many orthodontists, like true, certificate program orthodontists, practice in a DSO, in solo, in group practice, in Peds ortho. So we do know that the largest, and I can't give you the percentage, but the largest growing place where orthodontists are coming out and working is in a place where there is already is with a pediatric dentist, be it in a DSO or in a private practice. Co-located location.
If you're like most orthodontic and pediatric dental practices, you're probably struggling with oral hygiene compliance, observation conversions, and an increase of shoppers, especially among young patients and their families. In my practice, Wild Smiles makes converting observation and phase 1 patients easy. Young patients and their shopping families value a personalized experience. When I first added Wild Smiles to my practice, they made inventory and reordering easy, and they even led our team through simple instructions on integrating Wild Smiles into our existing systems. So we saw an immediate success. Grow your early orthodontic patient population with Wild Smiles to combat boring traditional braces and expensive phase 1 aligners. Check out wildsmilebraces.com/doctors to choose the customizable easy start kit that's right for your practice. Mention code KiDDS to save 10% off your first order.
Yeah.
I think another reason for the trend too is the airway space and starting at a younger age. Sometimes I feel like I'm practicing out on an island because when I talk to other orthodontists, they're not practicing that way. But in our office, we're starting younger and younger with expansion and things like that. Is that the way that you practice, Christina? Do you feel that blend of pedo ortho from a very young age?
Absolutely. So I work closely with ENT, myofunctional therapists, speech therapists, and then I'm examining all the time. So just last week, I had in our daily, we have like a template for our pediatric encounters, where we talk about what they drink, what they eat, home care, what kind of toothpaste they're using, fluoride, non-fluoride, blah, 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 blah. Occlusion, spacing, crowding, tonsils, hypoplasia. And then we grade our tonsils and we ask our parents how they sleep. And just last week, I had a 4-year-old and the tonsils were large. And I asked the mother, how does your daughter sleep? And she said, it's so funny you should ask that. I go to the pediatrician and they say, oh, they're large, but she's just fine. And
she'll outgrow them. Or she'll grow into them.
Exactly. That's exactly what she said. And she said, my daughter doesn't sleep well. Her bed is a mess. All the classic telltale signs.
Right. Bedwetting.
She wasn't bedwetting, but all the other things. Sleepiness, tired. She's like, she goes to bed. She sleeps 10, 12 hours a night, but she wakes up sleepy. She had the dark circles, mouth breathing. And I talked about Airway and all of these different things. And, Airway, it's always, what are we classifying as Airway? Is it checking an airway for sedation? Is it airway and function? Like, airway is such a broad phrase. Joel likes to say it's not your mother's airway. It's all sorts of things. And I said, let's take a CBCT because I have one in my office. And I showed her. And these tonsils and adenoids were absolutely ridiculous. And I went over and I say to them, I am not an ENT, but I can tell you that this is abnormal anatomy. And these are my concerns. And I put it on a USB drive. And I hand it to them and I say, it's time for you to go see the ENT, and they take them. And she hugged me at the end. She was like, thank you. I thought nobody was listening to me, and I know this isn't my child. And, just because she wasn't getting strep throat 10 times a year, she's getting it 3 times a year, and quality of life was not there. And so I start looking very early. My favorite thing to do, my father's was bring down impacted canines. My favorite thing is fix class 3 malocclusions, that underbite at the age of 4. And
what's your appliance of choice?
Bonded expander, protraction headgear.
Okay.
And they slide right forward. And I show pre-op, post-op, skeletal change from the beginning. It's fantastic. And we expand, and parents say to me, this is fantastic. And I have conversations with the parents, it is a surgical procedure. And I think that when they hear they have large tonsils and adenoids, we can wait, it's surgery, it's one thing. But I think when they get scoped and they can see it on the screen, it still doesn't quite hit home. But when you show them on the CBCT and they can see how large they are and they rotate things in space and they see that it's a boulder and it's really blocking, and I could make the mouth 4 times as wide, but that airway still is going to have that physical blockage, they go, I really don't have an option. I need to help my child and have a removal. And it really changes the child's life, the parent's focus, and how we look at things. I have an associate that came in and said, I wasn't taught this at all in my training. She was, fresh out of school, and I had someone else who was out 10 years who just joined my practice, and it's a different focus. And I'm not saying that those programs are wrong, but I'm saying that this is a topic that we are learning more and more and more every day.
Yeah.
I think as the co-location thing fits in, that's a perfect example of even though one may not be practicing on the same day because of space, when I filled in for like 9 different pediatric dentists, only once have I been there on the same day as an orthodontist. I wish I were with an orthodontist every day because I could see the advantage. Everybody would get a consult. At first they like me, and then I send them too many consults. But I think the thing is, the airway is one thing where you just mentioned the pediatric dentists. Maybe we don't get enough assessment. I learned a long time ago that pediatric dentists, when I was hanging out in this committee that was kind of fun a while ago with Rolf Barents, Buzz, and he represented Ortho, I represented pediatric dentistry back when there was a lot of conflict in practice and scope issues and practice scope. And we agreed on day one when we met, and we've been friends since, that pediatric dentists ought to be equally good at assessment of every aspect of growth and development. It's in the treatment where there's differentiation. And now that we have these new topics like airway and things like that, the communication is going to be improved when you're co-located. You're getting into some of the high-level advantages. Even if you don't share the same space on the same day, your systems are going to be integrated better.
Right.
Maybe not perfectly, because I don't know if one exists, but you're going to have better integration of information. Christina just has to talk to herself.
Well, I'm going to go one step further. I think not only do pediatric dentists need to be trained better on this, but their hygienists need to be trained on this as well. Yeah. Because oftentimes the hygienist spends more time with the patient than the pediatric dentist does.
Oh, absolutely.
And that hygienist, and I lecture on this all the time, I say we need to empower, they are the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
They are the ones that see and talk so much more to our patients. And I've trained my hygienists we'll go toe to toe. I have the best hygienists around, and they always want to learn. They always say, like, what did we learn today? And we have to learn every day. And they are always asking the questions, and so
I would send them to become a myofunctional therapist, and then you got 2 dual trained in your office.
Exactly. Well, there are certain states, unfortunately, where you have to there's like a political war where you can get training, but you can't say you're a myofunctional therapist because there's a turf war.
That's
in California, a lot of our myofunctional therapists were hygienists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in some states, dental hygienists can be diabetes educators. That's so if we get into this space of medical management of disease, which is what we're talking about here, non-surgical, biomechanical intervention, that's where the hygienists and assistants are going to get upgraded too, but hygienists for sure, because in some states you don't need a hygienist to do some things. Others in the Northeast US you do. But clearly, when it comes to, chronic disease management, medical management of conditions, whether it's an airway issue or whatever it may be, the hygienist is the one who's going to be the go-to. And that may not be a popular position at the moment. I can tell you, looking at the marketplace, that's where we're headed. And I'm working with groups and with the industry to facilitate that. Dentists are going to be, whether general dentist, orthodontist, or pediatric dentist, are the leaders of the team. They are, the decision makers and the overall planning and the treatment planning for the patient, just like in medicine. But I think we're going to see some changes in roles and responsibilities that's going to facilitate all of this going in the right direction. It's actually pretty exciting. And if we just let the marketplace decide, marketplace always wins, and it always does the right. You can't beat market forces. They always win.
Yeah.
Well, this whole, and I don't really know how long it's going to take or where we are in the cycle. But I've been talking to orthodontists for probably the last 3 to 5 years about, there's a lot of orthodontists that just don't really embrace early treatment. They don't really, sometimes they don't feel comfortable doing early treatment or diagnosing it because they weren't focused on that when they were in their residency. Or they just, they really want to be limited in early treatment, which, I would say that not everybody needs early treatment, but then you've got these pediatric dentists that are in a practice. They've maybe hired an orthodontist. They're a little bit more aggressive in treating some of these early treatment patients. And where are we in this life cycle where on the other end of the spectrum, we've seen that general dentists have kind of absorbed some business from patients that are doing aligners or mostly aligner treatment in that case. And so it's kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum. We've got the aligner adult patients that have been kind of in competition with the orthodontist, with the general dentist. And so where is the place for the pediatric dentist and the orthodontist? What is that going to look like in the next?
I'm going to interrupt and because Christina has the expertise on the early treatment, and I have no knowledge of that until recently. Although I will say, we're planning just to put it out there. I've mentioned this to you, Davin. I've asked Christina and a couple other dual-trained people to help create a study club on the subject of early treatment. So stay tuned for more on that. But I'm just thinking out loud here when you say early treatment. Again, I'm just learning about that myself. But I wonder, why do we call it early treatment and not early assessment and treatment? Because you just said, Christina, the assessment part, whether it's about Airway or just general growth and development assessment, the co-location has got to improve that. It's got to improve it. So it reminds me a little bit, our tendency in dentistry is to go to treatment. We're used to in dental school, we see a patient and we don't make a diagnosis of a caries lesion. We just say MO on number 3, DO on number 4. You know what I mean? We jump to what the treatment is. And I think this is a great opportunity. And the last thing I'm going to say here, because it's on my mind at the moment, is I've been hanging around with public health people my whole life, and I listen to what they say and about what they call true outcomes. And what's really interesting to me on this intersection of pediatric dentistry and orthodontics, each of us is managing a really important true outcome for our patients. For pediatric dentists, getting them out of pain. We deal with pain management. They're suffering. And we're helping them. We're preventing it and we're treating it. Orthodontics is dealing with self-esteem and how do I feel about myself, which is one of the most prominent true outcomes from a public health standpoint. And I think we can emphasize the importance of both, especially the prevention of pain, but also how one feels about themselves, because they look good and feel good. And I think ortho has been in my view, undervalued in terms of that growth and development aspect of, and I know there are campaigns around bullying and things like this, but I'm listening to that and thinking that's a true outcome. That's a really important outcome for our patients from a public health standpoint.
Yeah.
I agree completely. My father's been saying that forever. He said his favorite thing is watching his patients come in and feel more confident and not be afraid to smile and are now able to look you in the eye and talk to you. And we heard all the different things that they were, the bullying that went on in school, and like, you look like Patrick, you look like SpongeBob, all sorts of things. You look like, but he's older, so you look like Goofy, and look at Disney. All of the dumb characters are class 2. They have severe overjet and spacing. and all of the mean characters are class 3.
Mm.
You know,
Interesting.
and all of the nerds like wear headgear. You know, look at Finding Nemo, look at 16 Candles. You know, these are the things. And so media has really beaten people up for orthodontics
Yeah.
and for malocclusions. And, you know, we always say, I have a friend that says, like, we save children from being ugly. I always say, thank God for orthodontists, because my teeth were really messed up, you know? And I mean, I do practice in an area where most of the adults have had orthodontics. And if they haven't, they have like perfect teeth, you know, and everybody says, you know, if it wasn't for an orthodontist, we would not be a pretty world. And the other thing is, like, at prom time, you know, they put the picture of everybody up, and they always say $1 million spent on all those smiles, you know, and it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
It's not just function, it's aesthetics, but, you know, we have to look more at the whole picture. And
aesthetics is really big, and I think we underestimate. You know, you cited some examples, but I think to bring it back to early treatment that you asked about, which I just put a vote in to the group, put a nudge in that we should call it early assessment and treatment. I'm not here to change the names, but
well, I'm an advocate against phase 1. I always say
treatment
it's
you're
early
talking
treatment.
about.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not phase 1. It's early treatment.
But is it?
I'm very. Oh,
Could we say early assessment?
Okay, we can say
and
early
maybe
assessment.
well, we
You
can
have
do
to
it.
assess before you treat, but either way, it's not
True.
phase 1.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's been settled right here on how we're gonna
early assessment.
early assessment
Regardless,
and
the
treatment.
opportunity to assess earlier and perhaps treat earlier is improved with co-location. There's no question, and I think it speaks loudly to more conversation between us. Let's make protocols. Let's make workflows together. You know, we need to make a workflow for the co-located practice, what that looks like.
Absolutely.
And that's what I really wanted to dig in with you guys is what is your ideal workflow? Because, you know, the AAO recommends at age 7, it's even on my website. I'm like, I feel like I should take that off because our early assessments start much younger than age 7. So why are we as orthodontists, you know, telling the public age 7 should be your first orthodontic visit, which in pedo, we're referring at a much younger age. So I'm very curious what your workflow is for the co-location.
So I have my entire office is trained, no matter what discipline. We all speak the same language. And that's the first thing.
Is your staff dual trained?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
My team,
Yeah, ours is
my
too.
team. Yeah. There's some that do better in one than other, you know,
Sure.
but everybody can do everything. And we start talking at our first visit. Our first visit is at a year old. And usually parents are saying to me or asking me, you know, I had braces, my husband didn't. I hope my child has my husband's teeth. And, you know, it's kind of like this little joke. And we start talking about how the teeth are. We start talking about spacing and crowding. We start talking about habits at a year old. They have 8 teeth, if that. And that's when we start talking.
Absolutely.
And so I find, as you know, the years in practice, co-located, go on, the parents are now like, are they ready for any orthodontics yet? And I have to say, no, we're not quite ready yet. Nope, we're not ready. And let me tell you why. So every single visit, Joel, is an assessment, whether it be with the orthodontist or with the pediatric dentist. And
Right.
so that is where we start, and that is where our language starts. And like, when is the ideal age to stop using a pacifier? When is the ideal age to stop with thumbs? They're very different habits, you know? And so we really start then.
Right. But I'd love to, you know, my answer on the workflow is it's a work in progress, and I'm very excited about creating workflows, but creating it by the practitioners who do work together, designing, let them tell me what the workflow is so that we can train others with the best practices. And we're in the process of identifying what those practices are. Again, I go back to the first thing. Christina is both in one person. So you're good to start with. Now we need to figure out what are the differences between the workflow when you're one person or when you're 2 people, and 2 people on the same day or 2 people on different days versus 2 people in different practices. And we can look at the nuances, and then we can talk about the opportunities within each of those scenarios.
Well, if you ever want to pick my brain and how we do things, we do have a workflow. Is it the best out there? Probably not. Probably someone's doing it better. But kind of how we do it is our visits even start prenatally. Our pediatric dentist is really big with our lactation consultants in our area. He's scanning He is meeting with them even while they're pregnant and starting to talk about oral hygiene and so starting at that young of an age. And so basically,
I was going to say, can you put your workflow on the Facebook group as well?
Yeah. Like I said, it's not perfected. We're still trying to figure it out. Before, it was like at the age, every patient at the age of 7 got a scan. And now it keeps getting younger and younger and younger because we're asking more and more questions.
Are you calling a scan an iTero scan?
Yes, an iTero scan.
Or a CBCT scan?
God, I wish we had a CBCT. When I opened up my practice, I was like, what value is it going to bring? And I just didn't know what I didn't know at the time. So we're actually looking at getting a CBCT, but no, an iTero scan, because essentially we're doing virtual consults in our office. The pediatric dentist is doing the assessment. If he feels like they can benefit from early intervention, then they're taking full records for me. And then I will review them the next day, call the parent. A lot of times the parents don't even meet me in person before they get started with their kids, because Dr. Billy and I are just very cohesive on our language. And so he has sold the case even before they have met me.
At what age do you start? At what age do you start recommending a scan for that first visit?
So when they are behaviorally cooperative is the youngest. Typically, that's around age 3, but that's going to be a special 3-year-old as well.
Okay.
But we have expanders in as low as 4 years old.
Okay. That's speaking of that, as I mentioned, I'm one of the non-orthodontists here. And I didn't even know until I recently started interacting with Christina and all of you in the orthodontic space that we don't do what I was taught a long time ago, that we corrected every crossbite at age 3, and except mine. Confession, full disclosure, I have a crossbite as an adult.
Bilateral posterior crossbite, extremely stable.
I didn't even notice that.
I think that.
When do we pediatric dentists need to learn a lot too, is what I'm saying.
But I think orthodontists do too. I think that the weakest part of most orthodontic programs is early treatment.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I think that in training, there's a turf war between who addresses that, the pediatric dentist or the orthodontist.
Even me and my pediatric dentist are like, wait, at what age is it your expander or is it your expander? So there's even been a turf war in the same home.
So exactly. So that's one of the first things. The other thing is, like, everybody needs to be looking for the same things, and everybody needs to feel comfortable treating those patients. Now, you can have the most cooperative 5-year-old or 4-year-old, you still treat them a little bit differently and speak to them a little bit differently than your 13-year-old. So you need to have that skill set. And one of the biggest things of pediatric dentistry is behavior management. So here we are asking orthodontists, and most orthodontists aren't really working on the patient as much as their assistants are. So we're asking people who do not have the same training to do something that's not always easy on a super cooperative patient, to then do it on an somewhat cooperative, but on an even younger patient. So we're really like making things very difficult. So I think a lot of times why in the past there may have been resistance for early treatment is one, treatment trends have changed. We know that there are always trends. Sometimes, for a while it was taking out 4 premolars, and then it was don't take out, and then it was expand, and then it was aligners, and then it was self-ligating, and not in that order. So they're trends.
Right.
And so our trend now is earlier and less expansion, but also so if you're someone that has been out of training, or if your training program is a very traditional training program, you're always going to have some void. And how much continuing education have you had? And what is the quality of that continuing education? Some are really good and some are not so good. I know even when I go to CEs, I'm like, that one, I didn't learn as much as I hoped, or that one was a really great program, that really, I learned more than I hoped, so we have that going for us too. And then usually pediatric dentists will say, what's the weakest part of their program? Orthodontics, and I give the oral board review course for the academy, and I also give the comprehensive review course for the academy. And I go through how to even look at a case. And I had more than one person say to me, and these are already, they went through dental school, they went through pediatric dentistry, they passed the written part of their board. So now they're at this point, they're very well trained, and they've been practicing for a year and a half. They said, I never knew to look at convex, concave, or straight profiles, So we really need to start and teach where to begin from the basics. What are those pictures showing us? Why do we take those pictures? And why do we need a certain quality of picture? No, we don't need alginate impressions anymore, but I actually think we see way more in our 3D, like iTero or any other ones, but we can spin it around, and what are we looking at? And what does it mean to the bone? We've gone away from, taking an AP and a lateral ceph, for Alara, and for good reason. So most people only take a lateral ceph, but we are gaining so much more information when we do look from the front. And that's where a CBCT or even, their AP ceph really do come in handy. We need to look at bone. And these are the things that, if you're going to move teeth, I'm not saying you have to be an orthodontist, but you have to be looking at all of these different things. And this is where sometimes people get in trouble because they're not looking at bones. And this is where a lot of the do-it-yourself orthodontic programs, got in trouble, because in cartoons, you can move teeth and it looks beautiful, but in real life, we have biology. So we have to make sure that whoever is doing what is skilled enough to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
Now, being co-located is great because, Ashley, you and I both have dual trained teams. And so if younger patients or patients that may be a little anxiety, I don't know about you, but anxiety on inpatient forms is through the roof. It's an epidemic as far as children are concerned. And so what are the things that reduce some of their stress or anxiety? Going to a familiar office, seeing familiar people that work there.
Right.
Maybe the doctor changes, but at least they have other people that they know, especially with little kids. They literally and figuratively hold their hands. So these are things that reduce the stress for not only the patient, but also for the parent. And we take in our notes things that help. Oh, this patient likes to have a weighted blanket on them, or a lead apron, or this patient loves to use this fidget ball, or the squishy ones, but they don't like those. They like the soft ones, not the Nido ones. Those are all in our notes. Right. And so if we can go and hand that to that patient who can absolutely tolerate this, but these little sleights of hands make a difference. That's one of the beauties of co-location. And you may not necessarily have that in two separate silos, two separate offices, no matter how good communication is between those two offices.
And you don't we just started touching on a whole host of other things. This could be a very long conversation. It's going to get bigger.
Yeah, we're going to have to do follow-up here.
You mentioned scanning. And, if you're not co-located, and it's a pediatric dental practice, do they have a scanner? Unlikely.
True.
Very unlikely. And the same thing, and then as cone beams get into more ortho practices, it's also going to increase, the pediatric dentist has access to that on occasions. Also materials. And I know from the industry standpoint, historically, they're two totally separate sales forces.
Yes.
Who sell
different reps,
different companies. And you're seeing these distributors buying ortho companies that formerly only sold direct. They still sell direct, but they can organize their business better. They can be more efficient, more productive. Everybody becomes more efficient when you co-locate the business from all perspectives.
So
Correct.
That's actually a great segue into the question that I was going to ask was, from the business perspective, we've talked a lot about diagnosing and treating and all of that, but from just the blocking and tackling of the business side and the money side and the expense side, what are the biggest buckets that are the benefit or maybe the differences from a co-located practice to if you have it separate? Where are they going to see the biggest savings? Where are they going to see the biggest benefits?
I want to piggyback that question because it's kind of together. So do you have a budget that is separate for pedo and is separate for ortho, or is it one office budget? And kind of how do you, is it one office in your mind, or is it two different specialties in two different locations when it comes to spending?
That's a loaded question.
I really piggybacked it.
Yeah. And yes, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you cannot divide your front desk, and they are as unified as possible. It's not like, oh, you have an orthodontic question, you're going to go talk to this person. They're the only one that I'm going to pay to do that. So that's all that. Advertising is all the same. However, because you are combined, the advertising is you're for the same amount of money, you're advertising for two different businesses. Okay. So that's one thing. And then one feeds the other. And it really, so that's that. Obviously when we divide lab fees, the lab fees for pediatric dentistry are really, really low. And the lab fees, basically non-existent. And the lab fees for orthodontics is not low. It's much higher, especially when aligners are involved. So, or 3D, like indirect bonding, for putting on braces. So, it's really very, very loaded. Do we keep track of who uses what, and is it itemized? Absolutely. And because it is a larger amount, we have greater buying power for the things that we do use, when you work with some of the bigger companies like Henry Schein, the more you order, the lower your price. So I'm ordering for 2. So my cotton rolls cost less and gauze than if I just used the other. The other thing is when it comes to prevention, because I have all that fluoride varnish, I don't think twice about throwing it on some of my orthodontic patients if I see it necessary. The other thing that's great is the message and the prevention message. And oftentimes the pediatric dentist thinks that the orthodontist is managing the additional home care instruction and home care, accoutrement that you need when you're in appliances. And then the orthodontist thinks the pediatric dentist is managing that. So it's really easy to have a solidified, united front. I tend to put all of my patients on a high fluoride toothpaste when they're in appliances. Especially when they're using aligners, because I worry about that aligner decay pattern. We know if they're not brushing their teeth right after eating and they put on those super well fit aligners or retainers, that we're going to increase their caries rate. The same thing as if they drink anything outside of flat water. So we're recommending a Prevident or an Elevate Just Right, one of those. And so our hygienists will ask at every visit, which toothpaste are you using at night? And I love hearing, I use the candy apple one because I know that's the Elevate Just Right candy apple, and so we know and we give them in both sides of the office, so to say, the proper tools. Oh, are you using these? Are you using these? Oh, I really like using, the proxy brushes or the Ortho Pick flossers. And so that message is constantly given. And every 6 weeks or every 8 weeks or every 10 to 12 weeks, because that's usually when I see my orthodontic patients, we're checking their hygiene and we'll say, you need to go to every 3 to 4 month cleanings. It's not a punishment. It's protection. So there's so much flow between the two and so many eyes on the same patient, nothing falls apart.
Yeah.
We also save time. with retainer checks. We don't need to do retainer checks in ortho because they're being done on the pediatric side right at the cleanings.
Well,
Sorry,
you're thinking like a pediatric dentist, which you should, and you are.
With
and
that hat on.
Yeah, but I think that everything you said that had to do with a lot of things, but particularly the prevention part, the disease management part. I've recently decided. I just started working with the ortho program here in the Phoenix area, which I just learned they have an ortho program, and I'm talking to the residents about new ideas for their research and stuff, and I realized ortho is like the place to study dental caries. It's like the perfect lab. Why haven't I thought of that before? So there's all kinds of new products, new ideas, and the best way to test them is in this, what I call the in vitro laboratory of orthodontic scenarios. And you're describing that as a pediatric dentist, but I just want to say one more thing.
I think it's I think it's not pediatric dentistry or orthodontics. I think it's patient first. What are the patient's needs?
But it's the communication. Of course, orthodontists talk about disease management and home care, but if the message isn't one message, then it gets diluted. If you get two, it's got to be one message to the patient. And I think if you look at what's going on, just to get this in, I know we may be running out of time, but I wanted to say maybe this is another podcast about why this trend, and I want to come back with some data and numbers, because this trend is...
I would love to have you guys back. Yeah. I'm like, man, we're already approaching an hour. I have so much more to dig into.
I'd like to talk about why from the business standpoint, because I'm talking to all the colleagues, the ones who are buying these practices, who are consolidating. And of course, if you're a private equity company and if you're like outside of dentistry and you're not a practitioner, why would you buy a pediatric dentistry co-located with orthodontics, or why would you want to do that at all? It always has to do with two things with any investment. It's profit. They're buying profit. They're not buying production. They're buying profit, and they're buying market share.
Right.
It's those two things, and they're related, obviously. But I think when we have this conversation, we can talk about how you can improve your profitability and your market share related to profitability by the co-location phenomena.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably a great way to just say, hey, we'll do another podcast.
Let's put a pause. We'll put a pause on it.
But I think to kind of round out the conversation, I mean, it really does seem like this co-location workflow idea is really a win-win, not only for the practice and the practitioner and the business owner on the business side, but also for the patient. And it's not necessarily that they'll be getting better treatment per se, but they'll be getting a more cohesive team that understands what they need, why they need it, and when they need it, which ultimately does lead to better.
And that's a messaging for marketing in itself for patients, is why you want to seek out a co-location versus isolated offices.
Yeah.
I have pediatricians saying that to the patients. Well, where do you think I should go? Here, because of this. But my child's only one. Yes, but you're setting up for future. Right. And our tagline in our office is healthy foundations for bright futures. And that's really what it is.
Well, and I think a lot of medicine in the US and Western medicine is starting to really look at the whole person. So this is kind of, I think, a thing that's going to just continue to get bigger, right?
Oh, totally. It's what everything Dr. Carter said is about this phenomenon called chronic disease management, where dentistry is headed. We're headed into the rest of the medical world. Instead of surgery only, chronic disease management.
Well, I can't wait to, let's just get another call scheduled and we'll get this conversation continue.
What do we say? You always leave them wanting more? Hopefully we did that.
Yeah. Well, I want more. So Dr. Carter, Dr. Berg, thank you guys for taking your time and sharing your expertise and sharing.
Yeah, on a Sunday. Thank you.
Yeah, and helping us dive into this idea of a co-located practice. We can't wait to share it with our listeners. So
hey, and have fun. I think you're going to launch this around the this big meeting that's happening in Florida or something, right?
Yes. So this will be. We're actually putting this out as kind of a bonus episode for the midwinter meeting with the AAO AAPD. So I think it'll be
It's a perfect fit.
A great fit.
Well, I won't be there, but I know Dr. Carter is involved in planning it. So have fun there. And I think next year it's in Phoenix. So we'll have to do something in Phoenix next year. That joint meeting.
Closer to me. Hallelujah.
Let's do it. All right. Well, thank you guys.
It's going to be cold. All right. Have fun. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
If you like what you heard on today's episode, check back for a follow-up conversation with Dr. Carter in our March episode drop. We will dive deeper into the details of the co-location workflow and take out specific action points as we walk you through the process. Whether you are currently co-located or thinking through adding orthodontics or pediatric dentistry to your current practice, you won't want to miss the valuable insight. New episodes currently drop on the second Tuesday of each month. Are you looking to grow practice revenue, improve patient retention, and enhance overall practice success in 2025? Join our faculty of leading practitioners, all experts in the crossover of orthodontics and pediatric dentistry at one of 3 hands-on courses designed to equip orthodontist and pediatric dentist with essential knowledge and tools to establish and implement a successful Phase 1 bracket program to keep more patients in-house and grow your practice. Participants will be given a comprehensive roadmap to build a robust early treatment program and will be able to apply these strategies to their practice immediately. Whether you're looking to implement an early orthodontic treatment program for the first time or enhance your current offerings, this course provides the tools and knowledge to help you grow your practice and provide top quality care for younger patients. For more information on locations and dates, and to sign up, visit specialtyappliances.com/course/registration. Registration is open, and these in-office courses have limited space that will fill fast. So more information can be found again at specialtyappliances.com/course/registration.
Thank you for listening to the KiDDS Biz Podcast. We hope you gained valuable insights to elevate your practice. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. It really helps us grow. Want to dive deeper into our community? Join the KiDDS Biz Facebook group for discussions, resources, and networking with fellow professionals. Until next time, keep striving for success in your ortho and pediatric practice.